times do you catch yourself scrolling Instagram and you're like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. Look at that branding. I wish my brand looked that polished. Wow, that piece of content was so good. I need to start editing my videos differently. It's so easy to get trapped into this feeling of comparison. And then what happens is you feel like when you go to talk or create content, it's someone else speaking out of your mouth, right? Trust me, because I've totally been there. This is something that is easy to fall into, and I think most people have at some point. But building a brand requires authenticity and perspective and uniqueness, your je ne sais quoi. If you aren't able to bring that because you're stuck, because you're disconnected from your own voice and your own self. For years, I worked behind the scenes for businesses, helping them build their brands, build their businesses online. But this last year, I decided that I wanted to start building my own brand instead of only working behind the scenes for folks. I knew I had a lot of valuable content that I was sharing, but a lot of it just didn't hit how I wanted to. I wasn't giving it all of me. I was giving like, I'm a professor and I'm going to tell you how to do this versus like, here is how I've done it. Here is how I would do it. And also sharing who I am as a person. And it all came to a head for me at Christmas when I had a family party, and I realized that I used to be the person who was very outspoken. I would stir the pot, wasn't afraid to do that. I would argue with people. I would debate people if they said things I didn't agree with. But over the last few years, out of a desire to create peace, I had watered myself down until I became a shell of myself. I was physically there, but I was not mentally or emotionally there. And all to appease and seek the approval and love of some people who I don't think ever could truly give me that as myself, but they still couldn't give it to me as this version of myself that I had twisted up into some kind of pretzel to fit, I don't know, what I thought people wanted from me. I was doing the same thing in my business and in my content, always looking outwardly for what I wanted to create instead of trusting that whatever I truly wanted to create would be good enough. When I had this realization, everything started clicking into place for me. I don't want you to have this dramatic family event in order to start making the changes towards having an authentic business that not only works and makes money and grows your audience, but feels fulfilling, because that's one of the biggest problems, right? Is if you're not showing up authentically and sharing your unique voice and thoughts, then it's not going to feel good anyways. The first thing that we got to do in order to get past this is do a little social media detoxing. You don't have to totally get rid of it. I know maybe you have to engage with people, post your own content, but instead of scrolling, maybe be very intentional about which accounts you go visit and engage with, getting your content posted and then bouncing, closing the app, maybe even using a scheduling tool to schedule your content instead of actually going into the app and doing it. And then what works for me, and I do this with my kids a lot, is instead of trying to shut down screen time or social media time, I try to crowd it out with other things. Instead of saying we're only going to have 1 hour of screen time today, it's like, okay, let's go to the museum today. Let's go to the library today. Let's go outside. Let's go to the park. Let's try to do activities that are just as enjoyable, if not more, than the thing I'm trying to get myself to stop doing. My life this year in 2025, number one, I am trying to not spend time on social media in the mornings. I am replacing that time with reading a book while I am walking on my walking pad. Because if I start getting stuck in scrolling in the morning, the rest of the day is kind of screwed. And part of that reading is that I have big reading goals for the year. So I typically have 3 books at least that I'm trying to read every month. One is an audiobook that I listen to that's some kind of nonfiction book. I have a fiction book that I read at night before I go to bed that's part of a book club. And then I also have a physical nonfiction book that I'm reading that's usually personal development. I have time throughout the day where I'm doing those things instead of engaging in social media. I'm also rediscovering some of my hobbies. I have played the piano since I was a little kid. It's important to me, but because of business, having kids, life, I haven't been giving it any time or attention for years now. And so I have a strict regimen I'm trying to follow over the course of the year to not just re-engage in it for fun, but also improve my skills. So I'm playing the piano more, and then I am getting back into my bullet journaling. And just by introducing those things back into my life and being intentional with them, it just leaves less time for scrolling social media. Now, some days when big news events happen, things are going on in the world, there's two tracks to go. One is to just put the blinders on. Maybe you physically read some news articles to know what's up, but you don't go on social media. Or sometimes I just let myself have a rot day where I just do the deep scrolling and I'm stuck in it. And I let myself get stuck in it knowing that it's kind of like if I like bake a cake sometimes, it's so good that I eat too much of it, and then I'm so sick of cake that I don't want to eat cake for like months at a time. It's kind of like that. I fill myself up with it so much that I don't want anymore, and I will crave a detox the next day. And then this also gives you time to do the second thing, which is to figure out how to reconnect with yourself. And to me, in my mind, I have different versions of myself that have existed throughout the course of my life and that will exist in the future. And I have this, like, you could call it an inner child, but it's like my 6-year-old self that felt the most like me before the world changed me for the worse, if that makes sense. Although I've changed for the better as well. But it's like when you're old enough to start getting some consciousness about how the world works, and yet you're still in your own world, in your own mind, and you're not as influenced by things on the outside. Trying to get back into a space to feel. And I like to do this by listening to music, especially getting in touch with feelings that I'm not usually in touch with, by singing maybe emotional songs, screaming the All Too Well 10-minute version works. I might wear clothes that feel like what I would have worn then. I remember I had this head to toe purple outfit. It was a silk purple button down shirt and purple jeans. This is the 90s. And so I don't know, the color purple is my favorite color, but also feels comforting and brings me back to specific memories. Or I'm very nostalgic, so I have certain objects that I keep, and it will make me kind of get into that space again. And of course, journaling is super helpful. I'm a very visual person, even inside my brain. Everything is in an image, and it's so how am I recreating this image I have in my head now? And a lot of the work of growing up, and especially mothering, becoming a mom, is learning how to integrate that old self with your new self, because who I was before I was a parent was a completely different person. There's still a thread, who I was is still in me somewhere, but I've been transformed to a point where I'm almost unrecognizable in a way, at least to myself. And reconnecting with that authenticity of the childlike version sometimes is necessary, because you get too far removed from who you actually are. Okay, so the last one, this one's really hard, but it's to remove the judgment and the fear of failure. Listen, I feel this all the time. Whenever I put a piece of content out there that feels a little bit of a deviation, I'm oh my God, people are going to judge me, and they're going to think I'm weird, and they're going to think I'm stupid. But the biggest mindset shift that I have around this that helps so much is to view it just as a test. I'm just testing something. When I run Facebook or Instagram ads for my clients, we put different versions of the content out there. We target different audiences. And if one of them flops, I don't feel personally offended or sad or judged because of it. It's just oh, well, that one didn't work. But these ones are working. So let's move our budget over there. That's the kind of mindset I try to come into this with. And truly that's what we should be thinking of this as, because as much as we infuse our personalities in personal brands, it's still business, and we're still needing to bring some amount of objectivity to it. So I suggest being subjective, being personal in, for example, the creation of the content. But then once it's out there, taking that objective mindset of it's just a test and I'm going to tweak and move things around. And truly, like, the worst case scenario is people are probably just going to scroll by. Like, the worst case scenario, 99% of the time, is that it just flops. And that doesn't mean it was a bad piece of content. It could just mean your hook needs to be better. Your visuals need to be better, but the underlying story or the underlying meaning that you're trying to get out there could still be something that hits. It's just a matter of like packaging it properly. You know, some people do amazing at like 7-second reels where they've got really fun cuts and text popping up on screen. Some people get their message across better in text and creating carousels. Like, some people shine in the long form content, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there and test it in order to find what is actually the best thing for you. Nobody in the world is perfect. And so if perfection is what you're chasing, then you'll never chase or catch authenticity. You'll never catch who you truly are. Chasing your imperfections is probably the better way to go, because everybody is imperfect and your imperfections make you connect and be more relatable to other people. All right, if you need some help getting started with this and some prompts to help you dive into your brand, what your brand stands for, how to connect with your audience, I have a free Wild Growth Brand Guide at my link you can go check out.